Predsjednik Republike Hrvatske, gospodin Franjo Tuđman, dao nam je odobrenje da po prvi put formiramo nenaoružane odrede civilne zaštite Hrvatske demokratske zajednice.
Any doubt that Tuđman himself issued orders for the expulsion of Serbs in Croatia was removed by Tomislav Merčep, a senior member of Tuđman's ruling party, the HDZ. Merčep would later be identified by Croatian police reports as one of two Croatian leaders who directed death squads that murdered hundreds of Serbian civilians in eastern Slavonia around Vukovar and Osijek in the fall of 1991. He received little press coverage in the West, but Merčep was, in many ways, the spark that set the fire of war in Slavonia, a disputed region of Croatia where the Yugoslav war began. Merčep's co-leader of the Croatian death squads was Branimir Glavaš of Osijek. Unlike more discreet members of the ruling HDZ party, Glavaš made no secret of his identification with the World War II Croatian Ustaši as he welcomed returning Croatian prisoners of war. While some French intellectuals were hailing Croatia as part of the new Europe, old and familiar forces were at work. Osijek became a magnet for neo-fascist groups fighting with Glavaš. They included British skinheads, German and Austrian neo-fascists, and followers of the French extremist Jean-Marie Le Pen.
C'est comme ça que l'on bâtit l'Europe nationaliste.
Et vous y allez directement après, demain?
Oui, demain nous partons pour Zagreb pour prendre des ordres à l'état-major, mais pas de l'armée croate régulière. Nous allons avec la force de défense croate qui dépend du parti du droit croate, et donc nous partirons quelque part sur le front en Slavonie, je suppose.
The United States, which soon adopted Germany's approach to the Balkans, ignored recent history and offered a simple explanation for the fighting which broke out in the predominantly Serbian region of Croatia, which was known as the Krajina. Assistant Secretary of State Richard Holbrooke, who spent the early years of the Yugoslav war as the American ambassador to Germany, represented what became the official American view.
The Serbs started this war. The Serbs are the original cause of the war.
Those who tried to prevent the war saw it differently.
The Serbs in Croatia, and indeed outside Croatia, had a very vivid memory of what happened in 1941-42, when Hitler declared Croatia as an independent puppet state, if you like, and the horrors that went on there and the murders of the Serbs were still very, I mean, a very large number of Serbs were murdered at that time. I mean, hundreds of thousands. And I think it was very understandable that when Croatia declared its independence and promulgated a new constitution without any safeguard for the 600,000 Serbs who still lived in Croatia, the Serbs were very perturbed about this.
From the beginning, the Serbs were blamed, and they were partly blamed out of ignorance because nobody bothered to look back at the history to put it within its historical context and to see why the Serbs who lived in Krajina and the Serbs who lived in the area that is called Bosnia-Herzegovina, why, because of their historical experiences, were so hostile to being under Zagreb or under Muslim Sarajevo rule.
In World War II, Serbs offered the first serious resistance to Nazi Germany on the mainland of Europe. Later in the war, the Serbian royalists, sometimes known as the Chetniks, organized the largest rescue of downed American pilots behind enemy lines. But U.S. relations with the Serbs deteriorated greatly by 1989, symbolized by the stormy relationship between Slobodan Milosevic, the new leader of Serbia, and Warren Zimmerman, the new U.S. ambassador to Yugoslavia.
I think Warren came out of Vienna from his last post as an ambassador dealing mainly with human rights, and his first action as ambassador was to go to Kosovo and embrace the Kosovo separatist leaders. And this automatically offended the relatively new Serbian leadership under Slobodan Milosevic.
By the late 1980s, ethnic unrest in Kosovo had already set the stage for the breakup of Yugoslavia. For Serbs who first inhabited the area in the 7th century AD, Kosovo was the cradle of their civilization, their Jerusalem, and home to their most revered monasteries.
A bit of history, unfortunately, is required here. The Albanians pushed Serbs out in the 19th century. The Serbs started pushing Albanians out around 1904. The Albanians surged back in World War II under Italian protection and pushed Serbs out.
When the war ended, however, Marshal Tito decided to keep the Serbian refugees from returning to their homes in Kosovo. As a result, Serbs lost their majority in the province.
Tito is very guilty of that particular drama of Kosovo. He made it much harder to solve, in fact, almost impossible.
To keep a restive Albanian population within the Yugoslav Federation, Tito's 1974 constitution gave Kosovo autonomy as a province of Serbia. However, the autonomy was badly abused by Tito's Albanian communist cadres, who permitted a campaign of violence to drive out the remaining Serbian population.
Life was made extremely difficult for the Serb minority, and it was here that the Kosovos began to push to have a pure, all Albanian, meaning racially pure, a Kosovo in the areas where there were very few Serbs anyhow. They were pushing them out, and the Serbs used the word that it was ethnic cleansing, and that's what it was.
Homes of Serbs were appropriated by Albanians. Orthodox Christian cemeteries and monasteries were desecrated. By the late 1980s, the Serbian population of Kosovo had gone from 50% at the start of World War II to just 10%. At this time, Slobodan Milosevic emerged as the voice of Serbian discontent over Kosovo. Seeking to consolidate his political base in his own republic, Milosevic also spoke for Serbian minorities living in Croatia and Bosnia who feared the emergence of hostile separatist regimes. A lifelong political opportunist, Milosevic was willing to provide limited military support to the Serbs of the Krajina as long as it suited his own agenda. The Serbian leader's maneuvers, however, deepened the chaos that accompanied the breakup of Yugoslavia.
I think he is enormously to blame for his treatment of Western powers from the beginning of 1991. He regarded them as the enemy and he would not talk to them.
While Serbia's president shunned meetings with the American ambassador, separatist leaders were receiving a sympathetic ear from Warren Zimmerman. The American ambassador and his boss, Assistant Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, largely ignored the provocations of separatists in Slovenia and Croatia, who were backed by Germany and focused solely on the Serbs.
The two of them adopted a stance that was, from day one, blaming the Serbs for just about everything. The Serbs were the target of all of the actions of the United States of America from the beginning.
So did American news organizations, whose foreign correspondents relied heavily on the U.S. Embassy for their reporting. Yet the obsessive focus of the press with Milosevic served to divert attention from the role of Western powers in making an avoidable war inevitable.